It's time for a Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do it, because you did.
On Giants.com.
You know what I saw? New York Giant pride.
And the Giants mobile app.
17-14 is the final. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. Have some fun.
Welcome to another edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. John Schmeelk, Paul Dottino with you from the Hackensack Meridian Health Podcast Studio. Keep getting better. And to kick off today's show, we will take your calls later on as usual. We're joined by former Giants assistant coach, longtime NFL offensive coordinator, multiple-time Super Bowl champion, and former head coach of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, the one and only Charlie Weis Sr. Charlie, how are you?
It just tells you I've been around for a long time. That's all that means.
Now, Charlie's been in our programming before. We wanted him to join us now because the Giants selected Jaxson Dart out of Ole Miss. Well, but hold on, John. You didn't mention Ole Miss in Charlie's bio there. No, I did not, because it's part of Charlie Weis's Jr.'s bio. His son is the offensive coordinator at Ole Miss, so Charlie has obviously been locked into pretty much every Jaxson Dart game, I would imagine, Charlie, for the last 3 years.
Every play.
So, except for Charlie Jr., who we do hope to get on one of our shows down the road here, he has a great feel for Jaxson Dart and the way he plays quarterback. So, Charlie, why don't you give before we get into the details, your thumbnail on Jaxson Dart as a player for Giant fans that maybe really haven't watched him a ton at Ole Miss?
He's a poor man's Josh Allen on the field, and he's a poor man's Tommy Brady off the field. And that's high accolades that I'm giving. When I say poor man's, you can't take somebody who's never played it down in the NFL and compare him with Josh Allen and Tommy Brady. I mean, it's not a fair comparison. But he plays like Josh Allen. That's how he plays the game. I mean, you think he's a damn linebacker when you watch him play. I mean, he's a physical, tough guy who can make every throw. And when he runs the ball, don't expect him to go down, which is one of the things they're going to have to work on, is because if he has a choice, he'd rather hit you, than go down. So he'll figure that out. He'll figure that out. But what's probably impressed me even more is his development off the field. He comes there. Even though he's from Utah, he was kind of a California kid, coming from USC. He looks like he comes right off the beach in California. That's what he looks like. So he gets to Ole Miss, and it's interesting because he ends up at Ole Miss because Caleb Williams went to USC. So Caleb Williams was at Oklahoma, and when there was a coaching change goes, and his coach goes to USC, and he goes with him. Jaxson goes, okay, I'm out of here. And he got down to his final couple schools and ended up coming to Ole Miss. And it was great for both Jaxson and for Ole Miss. But his first year at Ole Miss, I was there that summer, and I'm sitting in the back of a quarterback meeting because I like watching my kid teach. I'm fascinated watching, his development as a coach. And I'm watching him teach, and at the end of the meeting, Jaxson pulls me aside and asked me if he could talk to me for a couple minutes. I said, sure. Now remember, I hadn't played it down yet. He'd just gone through his first spring. Hadn't played yet. And the first question he asked me is, what's the difference between a good quarterback and a great quarterback? That was the first question he asked me. So I went on to say to him that I'll leave the football to Lane and Charlie because I wasn't coaching him. It was Lane and Charlie. I said, but I will explain to you the it factor. I said, now, it is a word you can't define, but I can explain it to you, and I'm going to use Tommy Brady as my example. And I just told him how Tommy Brady was his first year in the league when he was our fourth string quarterback. And then I told him how he developed the entire year, what he did off the field the entire year, because you aren't getting any reps on the field. what he did the whole time to prepare himself. And then once he got the job, after Drew got hurt, he got the job, how he developed the mentality within the entire team. And then I watched Jaxson for the next 3 years go do that. He did exactly what we talked about. Now, not that my advice means anything, but that's what he did. So I watched him not only be a star player, an outstanding player, somebody where if I had to pick one guy in this draft to coach, that's who I would pick. I would pick him first. Now, I'm not saying no disrespect to Cam Ward or any of the other guys, but that's who I would have, because of my knowledge base of what I've seen from him on or off the field, that's who I would have wanted.
Charlie, if I may ask you specifically, on the field and off the field, could you give us one example of where he made the biggest growth from the time when you first met him to the time he's leaving Ole Miss right now?
Well, Ole Miss, had a bunch of players drafted this year, as you know.
Yeah.
A lot of those were portal guys because that's the environment that college was in. You know, the biggest recruiter of the defensive players at Ole Miss was Jaxson Dart.
Wow.
He's the quarterback, the biggest recruiter. Everyone wants to talk about Pete Golden, who's the outstanding defensive coordinator at Ole Miss, and wants to talk about Lane, who's like the portal king. You go ask all those players. Ask all those players. What are the reasons why they came? Don't mention Lane. Don't mention Pete. And all mention Jaxson Dart. So why are they mentioning the quarterback? And that's because what the great quarterbacks do is they lead the entire team. They're not just boys with the offensive skill players. They're not just boys with, those starting offensive linemen. Okay, they're around everyone. And that's one thing. You can't coach that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't coach that. That's something that's quite unique.
All right, I got a two-part X's and O's question for you, Charlie. Part one, and we'll take them one at a time, is as someone that ran NFL offenses for a long time, Lane Kiffin comes from the NFL. Your son obviously learned a lot from you, came from the NFL. What are the aspects of the Ole Miss passing attack that you think best translate from the college game to what he's going to be asked to do here at the Giants?
Well, how many yards did he average per completion?
I believe he led all of FBS. I think with 10.8 per attempt, I think, something like that.
How many downfield throws did he complete?
He had the most 10-plus yard completions in college football last year. Pretty good.
What was his completion percentage?
Just under 70%.
Okay, what was his touchdown to interception ratio?
More than, I think, 4 to 1.
Want me to stop? How long of a laundry list do you want? Here's why, you want something comical. Yeah, everyone says, well, he's playing in that offense at Ole Miss where, Lane Kiffin, who actually Charlie runs the offense with Kiffin's assistants, but that's okay. Okay, but Lane Kiffin's offense, they get guys wide open. I didn't realize as a coach your job wasn't to get them open. So I guess that's why the Ole Miss coaches must be dumb, because they're working schemes to try to get guys open. I mean, if that isn't the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life, well, they get wide open guys. Well, what are coaches supposed to do?
They're really good offensive coaches, Charlie. They're really good offensive coaches.
Let's make sure we get them covered now. Let's make sure. let's make sure we don't create any separation and scheme anyone open right there. But the two things that Ole Miss does that don't translate. Let's talk about the two things that don't translate.
Sure.
They play sideline to sideline. That means they spread guys out from the entire width of the field. In the NFL, you don't see that very often.
Right.
And they run such a fast tempo where they're snapping the ball a lot of times under 20 seconds. And other than a 2-minute drive, I'm talking about on every down. I'm not talking about in a 2-minute drive. I'm talking about, so they're running 100 plays a game because I mean, it's just rapid fire. Go, 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 go. No, obviously you can't do that if you go 3-and-out. If you go 3-and-out all game long, your defense is, on the field the entire game. But they use the entire width of the field and they go fast. So those things are not the normal NFL things, but every other quality that we talked about, I mean, tell me anyone who doesn't want those things that we just talked about.
No, it's fair. All right, part two of the question. Now take Jaxson Dart's skill set, right? You talked about mobile player, tough. He's got a good enough arm to make all the throws. How does that translate into what Brian Daboll wants a quarterback to do? You're one of Brian Daboll's coaching mentors. You know what his system's like. You know what he wants from a quarterback. How does Jaxson Dart fit into his system?
Who was the quarterback I compared him to on the field?
Poor man's Josh Allen.
You want me to continue?
Could you get into a little more detail for me?
Is this a rhetorical question? I mean, there's going to be a lot of similarities with what he does. Now, Josh Allen has one of those unique cannon arms where he can throw a zillion yards. Jaxson can make every throw on the field. He can throw the deep out. Okay, he can throw the deep ball. He can throw posts. He can throw in cuts. He can throw, and obviously they throw all the quick stuff on top of it. I mean, I think Brian, he's looking at this guy and saying, "Oh my God, wait till I can get him developed and get him on the field." I mean, I'm sure he's licking his chops. Now, if I'm a Giant fan, okay, now this is forcing me to be a Giant fan again, by the way, because I don't root for teams. I root for people, okay? Because I know too many people in the league. I don't coach anymore. So other than rooting for Ole Miss, I root for people. I root for success of people. So I root for Brian. Okay, I root for the people I know in the Giant organization. But I mean, if the Giants lose, I wake up the next day, I don't care. You guys do care because you have to talk about it. I don't have to talk about it, so my life moves on. But I think if I'm a Giant fan, I'm looking at this guy and they all have question marks, all because they were getting force-fed these other guys. That's all they heard about were the other guys. I mean, and the first thing the naysayers want to do is they want to go and talk about he threw a couple picks at the end of the Florida game, which he did. Okay, go back and look at the 8 drop balls in the Florida game, too. 8. No one wants to talk about the fact that there were 8 drop balls, multiple ones for touchdowns. The game could have been totally different.
Yeah, and frankly, Charlie, he played great until the last 3 minutes of that game.
Well, I was at the game. I wasn't very happy. Trust me. And at the end of the game, you had one bad pass and one where you're just forcing a pass at the end of the game. So did he have a couple picks at the end of the game? Yeah, he did. He had a couple picks at the end of the game, but I mean, I just watched. I mean, I got nothing bad to say about this kid. I'm delighted he went to the Giants. I talked to a couple people at the Giants. I traded texts with the head coach and with Tim McDonald and a couple of those other people. And what they did in the first round was what I was hoping they were going to do for a month. For a month, I was hoping they would take whoever was left over of the Hunter Carter exchange.
Right.
I figured one of them at least was going to be left over. Whoever was there, take that, and then come back up in the first round and go get Dart. And that's exactly how it played out. Somewhere along the line, I'm quoted as saying, I'd be shocked if the Giants took a quarterback at number 3. I would have been shocked. And I tell you what, I wouldn't have taken any of them at number 3. Not one of the quarterbacks would I've taken in the top 3. But they came back up and they played it exactly right. You got to give credit to Shane and Daboll and everyone else for playing that right. And I love the way the Rams are saying, yeah, we had no interest. That's a bunch of garbage. Because how quick did Atlanta make a trade with the Rams as soon as the Giants were on the clock? The Rams had already traded their pick away 5 seconds after the Giants were on the clock because they knew they weren't getting Dart. We weren't that interested, and the Saints weren't that interested. They're all liars, as you know, because all everyone wants to say after the draft is, we got our guys. And we had him ranked so much higher than everyone else. We can't believe he was still there. Have you ever heard a team organization not say how delighted they were with their draft? Never. I mean, next time it happens will be the first time.
Charlie, let me ask you a question that occurs with a lot of college quarterbacks, at least over many recent years. And that is operating out of shotgun. And then when you come to the NFL, all of a sudden now you've got to operate under center. Maybe it's only 20%, 25% of the time. But some guys find that adjustment a little more difficult than others. How do you think he will adapt?
Well, what do you think an intelligent quarterback, and this guy's on top of everything else, he's out, has a 3.7 grade point average. It's not like he actually goes to class, shocker, newsflash. One of these guys who actually goes to school too. But as soon as the season was over, what do you think the number one thing he worked on was? Taking snaps underneath center. I mean, so the season ends, the end of December, early January. I was at that game too in Jacksonville. So I guess it was like the beginning of January. I mean, it's what now? It's what, May? The end of April? I mean, he's had 3 months to work on taking snaps under center. I mean, it doesn't take a lifetime to work on footwork from underneath center, but it's definitely a transition. It's not like it's just automatic. But the last time I checked, Drew Brees was in shotgun every snap in college. How'd that work out?
Yeah, so was Patrick Mahomes.
I mean,
right.
So the good ones know, okay, I better start working on this now. And I think that's important. I think it's really important to learn how to do it. And you answer a question that I can't answer how he'll handle it, because each guy's going to handle it to a different level of expertise.
Charlie, when I saw him at the combine, if I may, John, one follow-up.
Go ahead.
When I saw Jaxson at the combine and I asked him then, what did he think he was going to work on before he got to the pros? He mentioned footwork first, which obviously is something that he has done based on what you've told us. The second thing that he said to me was, I'd like to go through my progressions faster. How do you work on that part of it as you get into the pro game as a rookie before you actually get to step on the field?
Well, a lot of that is tape work too, because there's two ways you teach quarterbacks who to throw the ball to. Okay, progression is one and coverage is one. They're two different. Now, progression, okay, literally progression is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's progression literally. Okay, coverage is you throw to the weakness of the coverage.
Right.
Only the great ones can do both. They throw progression based off of the coverage.
Right.
So if there's a certain coverage, it would go this, this, this. If it's a different coverage, you go this, this, this. Only the great ones could do that. And, I was blessed to be around some people, one in particular, who were just absolutely unbelievable. There'd be times where I'd watch a play and say, why'd you go there? And he goes, well, I was cover 4. I said, I was cover 2. He goes, no, I was cover 4. They had never ended up fully getting to it. And then I go watch the next day and watch the tape. And sure enough, he'd be right, but because he saw it happening before the play actually had a chance to really develop, so that they actually got to get in the coverage. But he'd be right 99 times out of 100.
All right, we talk about the quarterback developmental process, Charlie, once they get into the pros, right? Joe Shane and Brian Dable have already said Russell Wilson's going to start at the start of the year, and they're going to develop him in the spring and the summer. Then you get in season, right? When you're not going to have a ton of practice snaps, maybe he'll run the practice squad. Take me behind the scenes in that meeting room that the fans and even us in the media don't see. What is the quarterback developmental process like for a young player when they aren't out there starting, getting snaps? How do you get them ready without necessarily getting those reps once the season starts?
Okay, Are you talking about during preseason or during the start of the season?
I think once you get the regular season game one is to me when it gets tricky because you aren't getting the reps you're getting, during preseason and in the summer and things like that.
Okay, well, the quarterback coach / coordinator, you only coach one guy. You only coach the guy who's playing. And everyone else is sitting there taking notes. Taking notes and asking questions when it's the appropriate time to ask a question. So let's say that Russ is the starter, because right now he's been named the starter. So they'll be coaching Russ. But Tommy Brady has booklets full of notes that he took the first year. He was our fourth string quarterback. Fourth string. But mentally, he was preparing like he was going to play that week. And I promise you, I've watched Jaxson take notes. I watched it several times because, because it was Lane, because of Charlie and Lane, I would go there and I'd be sitting in the meetings. So I would never say anything, but I'd be sitting in the meetings and I'd watch because note taking was one thing I always observed to see who was writing things down, who wasn't writing things down. I mean, he was another meticulous note taker. So Jaxson is going to prepare. When he goes there, he's going to say all the right things. He's going to say all the right. He is just that guy. He is just that polished guy. He's the type of guy that you want to eventually be the face of your program because he says all the right thing. But Jaxson isn't going there to be a career backup. That is not even on his mind. He's going there to be ready for whenever he's needed to be ready to go. And he's not going to be shortchanged by not preparing in the classroom like he's going to play that week.
Something different about this, though, Charlie, is when I talked to him, he told me he had been a starter everywhere he went. And you've already talked about his leadership skills. This is going to be a little odd for him now to have to be the youngest guy in the room, the third string quarterback on the team. And while he may be mature and a leader and a sponge, this is certainly a different role for him.
He's gonna be a team guy. That's what he's going to do. I mean, he knows the game. He knows the game. So he knows that, you can't have multiple team spokesmen. I had that same conversation with Phil Simms one time, just so you know. I mean, we can go back to the big days when the Hostetler Simms and who was going to be the quarterback, and then they picked Hostetler, and then things weren't going so well. And I said to Simms, I learned a lot from this comment. I said to Simms, I said, why don't you say something when you see something? He goes, when you're not the starting quarterback, it's not your role to do that. It's not your team. And I think Jaxson will treat it the same way. He'll do it with the younger guys. He'll do it with the guys who, are backups who aren't playing. But he's not going to overstep his bounds because there's a hierarchy. And I think you have to respect the hierarchy within an organization.
I guess this is kind of a two-parter, but you can attack it any way you want. You mentioned you're in the meetings. I'm curious what kind of learner Jaxson is. Is he more of like a read off the board, I get it learner? Is he more of a visual learner? And to that point you made about learning how to do the progression reads, is that something, Charlie, that you can learn from doing film and board work just as much as you can learn from doing it on the field when everything's going as fast as it does in an NFL game?
Okay, let's start with the second part. You could learn to be better, but only certain ones can learn to be great. Everyone can learn to be better. That's what teaching and coaching is all about. Everyone can learn to be better, but to be great, it's gotta be something within them, that they get it. They're at a different level. And I watched him, that's the level he's on. Now, remember, I was in college. It wasn't for the New York Football Giants, but he was on that level. I mean, he's insightful. He was an idea guy. He'd ask if there was something that he'd throw out ideas when they were doing ideas. And, he could learn anything, but there'd be times you say, well, what about this? And Lane and Charlie were very open to him making suggestions because he had earned that right. When he first started, they wouldn't listen to him very much, but as the years went on, he became more and more, more and more involved. And then I know Charlie gave him a lot more latitude at the line of scrimmage, to change protections, they did a lot more. See, most college teams, the guys on the sideline are doing all that stuff.
Yeah, they all look, right? And they hold the boards up and then they do what they do, right?
But, he had the flexibility, at least by the time he got to year 3, if he saw the line was going to the right and actions was coming from the left, he'd have no problem going ahead and redirecting the line to go ahead and take care of it.
Nice.
Final one for me, Charlie, and we mentioned it a little bit earlier, that he's got the benefit of sitting behind 2 experienced NFL veterans, guys who've done some stuff in this league before, and he'll be a sponge. Just in general going in, how much better off is he to have those 2 guys in the room as opposed to being a rookie who might be thrust into his rookie season very early and being forced to play into the deep end of the pool?
My personal opinion on that subject is that any rookie coming in that can play behind a seasoned vet who's been there, done that, benefits.
Yeah.
I mean, that's hey, I want to see Jaxson on the field as fast as I can. I mean, if Jaxson started the first game for this year, it wouldn't bother me in the least. But it would mean that a series of circumstances would have had to happen to get there. I think that every quarterback coming in now, I've watched young guys play. I mean, how did it look for Bryce Young his first year?
Yeah.
I mean, it was a beatdown. Trevor Lawrence his first year, it was a beatdown. Peyton Manning his first year, it was a beatdown.
Troy Aikman.
I mean, there's been guys that have gone in there, it's just been a beatdown. Now, do you learn anything from that? Sure. You learn stuff from that. Caleb Williams last year.
Yeah.
Do you learn stuff from that? Absolutely you do. But then there's the guys like Jaden Daniels that goes in there and lights it up too. So I mean, there's a two-way street. But in reality, I think historically, you're so much better. Tommy Brady was so much better off sitting behind Drew Bledsoe for a year.
All right, a final question from me, Troy, then we'll wrap this up. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for the time. You talked to Jaxson. There's a lot of yes, sir, super polite, really nice young man. But to your point, I think it was in the first answer you gave, he's got some wild horse in him too, right? Like you watch the tape, he's trying to run over linebackers. There's easy ways to run out of bounds to avoid a hit. Instead, he's getting flipped by safeties. He's going in the air. He looks like the old John Elway tape where he's trying to score a touchdown. He does the helicopter in the air, right? So are the Giants, will they be able to tame some of that out of him? And I guess the second part is that how much of that do you want to tame out of him and take some of that gunslinger mentality out of him if that's what makes him special? You know what I mean?
Well, you don't want to take much of it out of him. I mean, you want to teach him, you want to get him to slide, take less hits. Okay, but you don't want to take it out of him. That's part of what makes him him. And let me just tell you something about this kid. Now, is he a big personality? I think to play in New York, if you're at the quarterback position, it's advantageous. It's advantageous to be like that, to be the way he is, because he knows the right things to say to the media. He never points a finger. He always takes the blame. He never takes the credit. I mean, and I watched him for 3 years. Every single time, when they lose a game, not once would anyone else be taking the blame like him. Lane would do it too. I mean, that kid would get up there and he wouldn't avoid the press, and he'd go to the press and sit there and say, I let everyone down. I let my teammates down. I let our fans down. I watch this kid. I mean, there's so many things, so many good things to say about this kid. Now, granted, he's coming in as a rookie, and he's got 2 veteran quarterbacks ahead of him. And Tommy DeVito, you can't throw Tommy out of it just because Jackson's there. And you'll notice you'll never hear Jackson not mention Tommy DeVito too. He did right off the bat. He didn't just mention two guys. He mentioned three guys. Okay, but that's who he is. And his teammates are going to absolutely love this kid. Okay, and the Giant fans, they're all going to be cynical by nature. It's going to be the jury's still out. We'll wait till
it's New York, Charlie, of course.
It's actually not New York.
It's New Jersey. Pardon me. It's New Jersey. You're right.
Yeah, don't say New York to a Jersey guy like that, John. It's not nice.
People always say New York. I mean, you can say the New York area. I'm okay with that. Okay, but I'm trying to get him to move to the Jersey Shore, but I don't think he wants to make that commute I used to make when I coached for the Giants.
He is the tan for it, I'll tell you that.
Like I said, he's from Utah, and you think he was off the beach from California. That's what.
Charlie, you're awesome. Tell the folks anything else that you want them to know, either that you have going on or anything else that maybe we missed.
No, I think that, like I said, I only get to be a fan once a week because my kid's down at Ole Miss, and I still have a lot of affinity to a lot of people in the Giant organization. And now with Jackson there, it's going to force me to have to put their game on every week, especially when he starts playing, whenever that is. Now, that might be, a year from now. It might be. But I'll be pulling for him, and I think that Giants fans should be very happy. And, I mean, I felt that the Giants actually made a robbery on this pick. I mean, to give away your second and get a late 3 this year and a 3 next year, to go up and get your quarterback for the future, I thought it was a thing of beauty by Shane.
Well, Charlie, for all of our sakes, we all hope you are correct. Thank you so much for the time. Longtime NFL assistant, former Notre Dame head coach, Super Bowl champion, Charlie Weis. Welcome to another edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Awesome stuff from Charlie Weis there, guys. Just a fantastic interview. I think we learned a lot. Going in, I didn't realize, Paul, that he was allowed into the quarterback meetings with Jackson and Ole Miss. So I thought that was really good insight there, and just a lot more that, a lot more of the same type of stuff we'd heard from people that have talked about the kid heading into the 2025 NFL draft. And look, Charlie's son coaches him, so obviously he's going to be super positive about the kid. We all know that. We all know that going in, and we have to all understand that going in. But for a guy that ran NFL offenses and was with perhaps the greatest quarterback of all time in Tom Brady, to speak so highly of the kid, I think says something.
Well, two things, John. Number one, the positives that he gave us were consistent with other positives we heard.
Correct.
Nothing there was out of bounds or came out of left field. But then, like you said, the fact that he sat in the meetings with him, I did not expect to hear that. I knew, obviously, with the connection through his son, he would have detailed info about the player. But never in my wildest dreams did I expect to hear that he sat in meetings and that Coach Kiffin would have allowed Charlie Sr. to be a part of those rooms. So when I heard that, immediately it enhanced everything that he said about 3 or 4 times over, because of the credibility factor, knowing that he wasn't just going off his son's hearsay. He was in the room seeing it and hearing it for himself.
All right, let's go to the phones at 201-939-4513. Walter in Nebraska will lead us off today. Hi, Walter. How are you?
What's going on, fellas? Hey, listen, I'll be quick. I know there's probably a ton of guys trying to call in. I'm in love with the draft. I just, first off want to say that I think, Joe Shane and Dabo did a great job this year. I just got one quick question and a couple different comments. I was just thinking, I didn't know where or who would probably get more snaps at linebacker. Would it be Tibbs or Carter? I just didn't know what the type of front that we would be running. How would they employ to get Carter on the field more, or who would they figure out would be better at rushing?
Well, Walter, honestly, real quick, I think they'll probably be close to the same. I think Thibodeau will probably start playing more early. Carter will gain, and if he starts playing really well, he could surpass him late. But I think they'll probably try to equalize Burns, Thibodeau, and Carter as much as they can.
I agree with that. And to be honest with you, because of the various pieces of talent that they've added to the roster, Carter, Golston, Ledbetter, Alexander,
Roy Robertson-Harris.
They've got the ability to truly mix things up. They can use a variety of different looks that they could not use last year because, John, they didn't have the personnel to do it.
Correct.
Yeah, I think we're all hoping for, a better performance out of the, Shane, the DC. So that would be fine. I just want to see the, whatever's working for us. I guess, as far as the quarterback position, I was hoping for Milroe. I just think that, we need with our division and all of quarterbacks that we face, I was just thinking that, a more of a dynamic quarterback. Now, don't get me wrong, at the beginning of it, I didn't want a quarterback at 3. I was definitely hoping for, Carter, at 3 and either Milroe or Dart. I would have been fine with Milroe or Dart. And I guess I want to say that I definitely could recognize that Dart is a way more efficient passer than Milroe for the quarterback spot. And I guess that if anything, I would want my quarterback to be an efficient passer and just always have to put himself at risk running like Milroe would. But I just think that that Milroe is such a dynamic. If we could get him on the field, being an efficient passer would have been way more of a dynamic quarterback in our division. But and I think yesterday there was a previous caller that had and I understand that we have to put the best face on forward. But the guy was saying that this organization is hard to move on from certain players, which I totally agree with his perspective. It's like, I think it was up until a week, like maybe 2 weeks before preseason last year. You guys tried to sell us on the tackle the whole time. Oh, he's just hurting. But as soon as he comes back in, it was like they did not want to. And I think
wait, hold on.
The guy I'm lost.
What player you're talking about? Neal?
Yes, Evan Neal. It was up until maybe like 2 weeks before preseason that they didn't want to move off of him. Oh, just when he comes back, when he's just working on rehab, but he'll be. They were holding that spot.
No. Hold on. I want to make sure you got some clarity here. Illuminor took the right tackle spot during the course of the preseason and training camp. He took that spot.
And in the spring, for that matter.
Yes, and that was his job. Nobody told anybody that Neal was going to come back and take his job. What was said is that Neal, as he rehabs and gets healthier, is going to continue to work at right tackle behind Illuminor. Nobody said that.
Yeah, I think honestly, Walter, I'll be honest with you. If you would have asked Paul and I, at the end of July, like right when camp was starting, who we thought would be the starting right tackle week 1, we would have told you it was Jermaine Illuminor, and I don't think we would have had much doubt about that.
I think we did.
Yeah.
I don't remember it that way. Like I said, I could be wrong, but I don't remember it that way. I just remember it's just that, they were holding the spot for Neal, and Illuminor was just filling in. They was just, we got to have a body there, and he was filling in. And so then, then they like they was just like, no, it's just not working out.
Okay, and here's what you may remember
before training, and then the crazy thing, man, is, and I think Charlie just really was trolling you yesterday.
I think he was too. I know, and I fell for it.
Yeah. I think he really just, I said, man, there's no way you could just be upset with this draft, man, and how they did it. And to me, it's like, okay, if Dart is going to be the guy, and I was really, Lance hit an excellent point. If we could just be proficient enough to be, in in and out of the season, valiant for a playoff spot. That's way better than the last 10, 15 years 10 years, like 7 years that we've had for, you see what I'm saying, for this. So the efficiency at the quarterback spot, you know, I think that's just a wealth, you know, a big prosperity for us as Giants fans, just because we just haven't had that. We haven't played competitive football at all the last couple years. So, you know, I mean, I would say besides the year we went to the playoffs, yes, that was exciting to see. I actually went to the game in Minnesota as well, but
nice.
You know, it just wasn't. You know, it was like we barely screeched by on all of the games that we won that year, and it wasn't.
Come on, tell me you didn't have fun that season.
No, but his point is that they won a lot of close games. Right.
They did.
No, Walter,
it was fun.
Walter, real quick before you hang up, you're in Nebraska, so I'm sure you've seen some Thomas Fidone play tight end with the Cornhuskers. Give me your scouting report on Fidone at tight end.
Oh, geez, bro, listen, don't ask me. I can't stand the Huskers. I'm originally from New York. You see what I'm saying? I'm originally from Harlem. And these people are just nuts out here about the Huskers. Every year they're winning a bowl game, and this is their year. So I just can't do it, fella.
Thank you, Walter. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I mean, he just, you know, from the highlight tapes, he looks pretty athletic. You know, I'm just, whatever the cream of the crop that rises to the top, that's all I'm about, fella.
Cool. Walter, appreciate the call, man. Your phone's kind of crapping out a little bit there at the end, but good stuff. Appreciate it. All right, couple things on what you said. Is Jaxson Dart dynamic running the ball the way Jalen Milroe is? No, he is not.
Nobody is.
Not
from this draft class.
You might not have running backs in this draft class that were as dynamic running the ball as Jalen Milroe. That's how, like, he's A+, like Lamar Jackson level running ability. He's a monster. But if you look at the rest of the guys, Paul, I'm trying to think of the other quarterbacks. What other quarterback would you say for sure has a better running tool than Dart does from this class?
I don't think there is one.
Maybe Riley Leonard? I think Leonard's more physical. I mean, Leonard would just, put his shoulder down and run the quarterback power.
Dart will do that too.
Yes, but Leonard was a little bit bigger.
Yes. I think that Dart probably, if you just were going to grade these quarterbacks on legs and mobility and certainly escapability, I would go with Dart right after Milroe. But, ultimately, and again, I understand. I think we talked about this last week, John. Milroe, to me, if you draft him, any team that were to take him, and obviously he eventually did go a couple rounds in.
Which, by the way, I think is a nice fit for him. You have Sam Darnold there. He's under contract for a couple years. He can develop behind him. I think I'm happy he found a good spot where they'll use him as a weapon, and then he can develop as a quarterback.
Well, yeah. I think right out of the box, he'll get a package.
Oh,
he will get a package.
They'd be stupid not to give him a package.
They will have gadget plays from Milroe right out of the box in Seattle. There's no doubt in my mind about that. And so let me just cut off everybody at the pass. The first time Milroe takes an RPO on a 3rd and 15 for Seattle and runs 65 yards for a touchdown, I don't want to get a phone call saying, see, Milroe should have been the guy. Because that's the kind of gadget quarterback play he is going to be able to give the Seahawks, at least initially.
Yeah, I'd say Howard and Leonard, Paul, would be the two other guys. Because Howard could run a little bit.
Howard had some mobility.
He did. But I think Dart is probably a little bit ahead of those two guys, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
I would think.
I think so.
Shuck might actually be faster in a straight line. Remember, Shuck ran like a 44.76 at the combine, something like that.
But it's not the same when you're playing.
Well, no. And, it's funny. I didn't go back and watch the Texas Tech tape. Phil Simms told me he did, because that's Phil. And apparently, they used him as like a design runner at Texas Tech, Tyler Shook. And then once he broke his collarbone for the second time, I think they put it into that.
Enough.
But apparently, he was a design run guy at Texas Tech, so I think he's actually a pretty good athlete. But look, he's right there. Whichever one of those four guys you think has the best running tool, they're right there behind Shedeur Sanders. And then real quick on the Evan Neal thing last year, guys. Look, we said the whole reason you bring in. And we were talking about Michael Onwenu before free agency hit, and then because I said, look, you want a guy that can be there at right tackle if Evan Neal doesn't get back and you don't feel good about it. And then the Luminor is basically the same guy, just at a lesser price point, right? And once Neal tried to come back in the spring, wasn't able to do it, they had to sit him back down again. It became pretty clear heading into camp that Luminor was going to be the guy. And unless something happened to him, Neal didn't start practicing until what, the third week of camp?
Yeah.
Fourth week of camp?
And he got some reps at the very end of preseason, but not a whole lot.
No, he only played in one of the games.
That's it.
So, and he didn't do the joint practices either, if I remember correctly.
No. So, to be frank, not only did Luminor seize the role as the starting right tackle.
He might have did the joint practice against the Jets, Neal. I think he might have did that one, but he didn't do the first one, I think. He might have done the Jets.
I don't recall.
I don't remember. But that was only one, anyway.
But the point being, once Luminor seized control of that job, and it certainly was a very real possibility from the get-go, he never let it go.
Right.
And I don't think he's letting it go this year either.
Correct. No, I don't think he is either. I'd be very surprised. I think Neal has a shot. I mean, we'll see where they work him. They've been a little cagey about where he's going to work, guard and tackle. But look, I said it again. I'll say it again. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I think Evan Neal, with his skill set, has a real chance to be a pretty good NFL guard. I really do. With the side-to-side mobility, range and stuff like that. Tackle, with all the leg injuries he's had, I'm not sure we're going to get there at this point, at least not in this year. But
wait and see.
Who knows? But I think tools-wise, there's no reason with his power that he cannot play guard well at the NFL level. There's no reason for that, in my opinion at least.
And there are several options at the guard spot right now on this roster.
There are, absolutely.
So somebody's got to step forward.
Yep. All right, let's go to Ron in Pittsburgh. He's up next. Ron, what's going on?
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Thanks, you.
I've got two questions here.
All right.
One on the Giants offense and one on scouting.
Bring it.
Regarding the offense, well, this has to do with Jaxson Dart as well. So the deficiency in his game that I've read multiple times is that he's not the great processor, where if his first read of a receiver isn't open, he'll tuck the ball and scramble, which isn't a bad thing in college. It clearly worked for him.
Yeah, Ron, and Ron, you're right, by the way. I'm not going to argue with that, but I think, and this was the same thing with Caleb Williams last year at USC. In those very collegiate, schemed-up systems, a lot of times they'll have a play designed, and it's not really a full field read, and it's just, all right, well, go target that safety. If he does this, you throw it to this guy. If he does that, you throw it to the other guy. And if neither of those are open, sometimes you don't have much of a choice but to run. Now, there were some plays in college, if you go through the Dart tape, closely enough, and Joe Shane said this to Paul and I on our YouTube interview with him, that also showed up in the Johnson podcast, that if you look hard enough, there is some full field progression stuff. It just doesn't happen that often. You don't see it every play. You don't see it that often. So if you look hard enough, you can find it. But I agree with you. That's something that you need to see more consistently on the NFL level. And that's why I had him as a second-round guy, too, because I think you just don't know how much some of that stuff that Kiffin and Charlie Weis Jr. schemed up for him will translate to an NFL offense.
I think the two things important to note about this is that, number one, Dart said at the Combine, the two things that he knows he's got to get better at is the footwork, knowing that behind center was going to be something he had not done. And then the second thing was he said he had to get through his progressions faster.
To your point.
Because he hadn't done enough of it.
Yep.
Now, the key there is that it's not like we know he can or cannot do it. It's that he hasn't done it very much.
I'll go back to
so it's an unknown.
I'll go back to what Kurt Warner said to me on the Giants Huddle. I'm trying to get Kurt on to talk about Jaxson in the next couple of weeks. I haven't set that up yet, but I'm trying. He said to me on the interview I did with him last year, talking about the quarterbacks, don't knock a quarterback for something that you're not sure he was asked to do. And I don't know how much he was asked to do that stuff, Ron. So that is definitely, no question about it, a wait-and-see proposition. I'm sorry for interrupting you. Please finish your point.
No, that's okay. That actually leads into the next part of my question, which for, quick little background. I remember watching a lot of the games last year, and the color commentator or whoever I was, announcing the game said that, that was a great play design. The receiver was open. It was a missed throw by the quarterback. Or the receiver was open, and the offensive line didn't hold up. So my question, I guess, is specific to the New York Giants offense and the fact that with receivers getting open seemingly easily, is that deficiency or that processing part of Jaxson Dart's game, is that going to be minimized because we have so many receivers that get open, or is that something the coaching staff maybe identified as not that big of a deal because of the way the play design happens and that our receivers tend to get open with some separation more than other teams, it seems like to me, or am I just totally wrong there?
I think that's a good question, Ron, given I don't think, Giant wide receivers are running wide open more than any other teams. I think that's just it. No. It is what it is. But as a quarterback, you still have to anticipate where the open player is going to be based on what the defense shows you. And I think this is where you get more experience in the NFL, right? What Jaxson Dart looked. I'm sorry.
Be more of a pre-snap read.
Both. It's both. And you literally beat me to the point. So pre-snap, you have to see what the defense is in. You get your initial read. And again, I've never played quarterback before, but this is how I understand how it happens. You get your pre-snap read. All right, I think they're going to be in this coverage based on down and distance where the guys are aligned. This is, if they're in that, what I think they're in, I'm going to call my protection, shift my guys around if there's a blitz coming, things like that. And then this is where I'm probably going to go with the ball. That's the pre-snap part of it. So yes, that I think will carry over because in college you're doing the same thing. You're seeing what the defense is giving you pre-snap and you decide where to go with the football. The change and the difference is going to be once the ball is snapped. Because in the NFL, very rarely what they show you pre-snap ends up being exactly what they're in once the play gets going.
Right.
So what gives these college quarterbacks, and I'm not being specific to Jaxson here, this is all college quarterbacks. Once you start in what you're starting in, and then you might start in with a single high safety, but then the safety sprints back, you're in a cover 2. Or you start in a cover 4 shell, and the safety comes down hard, and you're in cover 1 or cover 3, and that safety goes in the flat or in the robber spot, something like that. And that's the key here, Ron. The quarterback then, based on what the defense shows post-snap and how they move around, then has to know where to find that open receiver. If the receiver's open, but the quarterback's looking in the wrong spot at the wrong time, he's going to be covered by the time the quarterback gets to him. Because guys don't stay open that long in the NFL. That's just the way the league works. So it's still very important for based on what, and this is really the whole key of playing the quarterback position, right? Where do I go with the ball based on what my play design is versus what the defense is in? That will dictate where you throw the ball and when you throw the ball. So you still have to properly combine those two factors to know where to look to find the open guy. And the quarterbacks that do that most consistently, and Charlie Weis said that in the interview too, right?
Yes.
Those are the quarterbacks that end up being great.
Well,
and that's what all these guys have to work
The great ones take it to a third level because they're able to understand the disguise. That's what it comes down to. It's not just the pre-snap, and it's not just the routes, and it's not just the play that was called and how that all mixes together like a meatloaf. It's now how do you discern the disguise, which is happening as the play is alive. That's where you now go to the next level. And he cited Tom Brady how many times in our conversation?
Yeah, where Tom, in the middle of a game, Charlie would think the defense was in like a cover 4, and Brady would come to the side and say, no, coach, he was in a cover 3. And Charlie would be like, all right, well, whatever, I'll look at the tape later. Then he would look at the tape later, and he'd be like, no, Brady was right. They were in a cover 3. So that's all part of, Ron, the thing that I find really hard to evaluate when you scout quarterbacks. And the way I like to talk about it is how much they're able to slow the game down. While for us, it's going at 1,000,000 miles per hour. But can they take what's on the field going really fast, slow it down in their mind to the point where they can accurately see what's going on, process it, make a decision, and then follow through on that decision. And that 4-step process happens in about a half a second.
Yeah.
Like that's what's tough for us to judge if a guy can do that well, and that's what the Giants process, and they talk about their quarterback process, right? Again, folks, if you haven't watched it, go to the Giants YouTube page, Giants Huddle Podcast, watch the interview Paul and I did with Joe Shane. And Joe Shane talks about the ringer they put these quarterbacks through with Brian Dable and Shea Tierney and Mike Kafka in terms of trying to figure out that exact part of it. How quickly can they adjust things on the fly? Do you understand not just the X's and O's of a play? Do you understand the concept of the play? Why you're going where you're going when? Why you're going to one receiver over the other? Because if you understand the concept, then you're able to adjust when the defense shows you something or gives you something that you're not expecting. If all you understand is, all right, on this play, I'm watching the weak side linebacker. If he goes into the flat, I'm throwing it to the tight end curl. If he covers the curl, I'm going to the running back in the flat. Okay, that's great.
And it's got to be done like that.
Right, but here's the problem. If the defense shows you something completely different and that guy's not even in the right spot on defense, then you don't know what else to do on the play. But if you understand the concept of the play, you can naturally go to the next thing and still make it work. So that's what that ringer that they put the quarterbacks through, Ron, is designed for them to be able to figure out.
Ron, that's not even the worst part. As hard as all of that is, and once you get done digging through all of that, now you got receivers who don't run the right route. And the ball goes awry or the ball gets intercepted and everybody's saying, oh, that was a terrible throw. Well, maybe the quarterback did everything that he was supposed to do, but the receiver didn't read it right and he was the one who screwed up.
Or everyone does everything right, but the defense is so good, everyone's covered anyway.
And they made a play.
And then you have to throw it to the right leverage. You have to throw a receiver open when he's covered. There's a reason why it's the toughest position in sports to play.
Bingo, 10 times over. That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's a lot to go through for sure. I'm glad
Indeed.
this guy. I just have to get to the ball.
And you get 2.5 seconds to do it.
And by the way, Ron, that's why when people call up and I see people, fans writing on or not even fans, even reporters sometimes, writing on the internet about, well, this guy read this play wrong and the process.
Unbelievable.
I kind of just roll my eyes and I'm like, guys, there's no way for us, laymen's to know. Like, if a former NFL quarterback wants to tell me how they're supposed to read a play out, I'll listen to them because they know what they're talking about. Yeah. But there are too many people out there that think because they're really good at, like, Madden 2023 that they know how to, like, read out NFL defenses and, like, where to go with the football. So, it is what it is.
There was one year Eli threw about 20-something interceptions. And
2013, right?
And I can't remember exactly what year it was now. But that year, I had gone back and I had, through my conversations with coaches and players, I had been able to discern that 9 of the interceptions were on the wrong routes run by the wide receivers. And they weren't on Eli at all.
2013, he threw 27.
There you go.
2010, he threw 25.
Yeah, it was the previous one.
Yeah.
I mean, 9 of them because the receiver actually butchered the route and got Eli picked off.
And Ron, by the way, all the stuff we just talked about, and really good call, and trust me, we'll let you finish your second point, but I thought it was important to get through all this. This is why college quarterbacks need time to develop. All this stuff we just talked about, and in college, guys have 2 or 3 yards of separation. They're easier throws. In the NFL, just having your shoulder 8 inches in front of the defender, that's considered open. So that's why it takes quarterbacks, for the most part, so long to develop at the pro level. And by the way, one of the reasons Jaden Daniels developed so quick last year, look who his offensive coordinator was. He put a lot of those college concepts into the offense, so he would be able, and to his great job by Cliff Kingsbury to do that.
Yes.
Awesome job.
Yes.
And he was able to pick up a lot of that stuff quickly. So all that together, that's the quarterback spiel. You can keep going on that, or if you have a second point, you can get to that too.
Yeah, I do have a quick second point, and it's basically. I loved all the interviews you did with GMs and college scouts and things like that. But have you ever asked one of them or heard about how they evaluate their evaluation process? Like, oh man, I can't believe we missed this guy in the 3rd round. Where did we go wrong? Why didn't we have him on our board? Higher up. So I was just curious if you had anybody talk about how they go back and evaluate their process.
No, absolutely, Ron. We have.
Where to put more stock.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate the call, man. Good stuff.
All right.
Yeah, look, and they'll do that. Joe Shane talked about it. I forget, one of these press conferences he talked about. I remember which one. They'll go back and they'll look at the guys last year. Well, we had this guy in round 3. He played like a round 1 player. Why did we have him in the 1st round? This guy we had as a 2nd round player, but he looked like a 5th round player. How did we miss on that? And then they try to go back, adjust their evaluation process to make sure they don't make that mistake again. Look, sometimes the mistake's medical. Sometimes it could be film work. Sometimes it could be bad information. Who knows? Whatever it can be. But they will evaluate their process to make sure they don't make the same mistake again.
If you want more detail, every scout has a specific report that they have to write. Every report goes through a double check and a regional scout and a supervising scout. those guys will then add to their notes.
For the Giants, it's an area scout and a national scout.
Exactly.
That's what they're called.
And so they will go through these different levels of scouting processes. So now every guy has his scouting report, which is based on the actual tape or the actual eyewitness game accounts. There's that. Then there's the medical. Then there's the psychological, the testing, the interviews, and all that stuff goes to a nice thick folder, John. A nice thick folder.
I think most of it technically is
in a computer.
It's probably electronic now.
Yes, it's in a computer. Yes,
you guys walking around a big manila folder.
It's an electronic computer that has a big folder, okay? So here's what happens now. After X number of years, all right, they'll go through each guy every year, but they will also go back and say, okay, for example, such and such player was with us for 3 years. He did not pan out at all. It just did not work. Let's go back, open up that file, and see what did we write on the report about him. What did he do that matched the report? What did he not do that did not match the report? And okay, now, is that because he just didn't develop? He didn't have the heart or the desire to learn? The coaching staff didn't bring out the best in him? Or was our process flawed?
Right.
Were we looking for something here that we thought proved a certain element of his game, and it turns out we shouldn't have been looking at that particular area because that didn't really translate into the production of this player. We need to change our requirement or change what we're looking at in the player. And this goes on all the time.
Yeah, and you also learn, by the way, which one of your scouts are better at scouting which position.
Yes, no question.
The Giants had a scout here for a long time, Jeremiah Davis, right? He was here for a long time. He was great at scouting defensive backs. That was his thing.
Yep.
And he's retired now. He was here for a long time, great scout. And you learn what the strengths and weaknesses of your scouting staff are, right? And you then, maybe you're going to have one scout cross-check all the defensive tackles because he's really good at scouting defensive tackles, right? So you learn that about your staff as you go along as well. All right, we're already past 1:30, so let's get to James in Pennsylvania. He'll wrap up today. James, what do you got for us, man? Thanks for calling in.
2 points. Can you all, elaborate on, just for 2, 3, 5 minutes, on the smoke that the Giants blew for the draft? Because they said they've all had Dart picked in January, and all that smoke was blown through the whole NFL that we was going to pick who. And that's my first point. Just talk about that a little bit, all the smoke we blew.
Okay, and then what's your second point? Yeah.
I'm just sad about Simmons. I thought he was going to be the key to the defense, but I guess not.
Thank you, James. Appreciate the call. All right, Paul, why don't you give the Simmons spiel, because you're one of the captains of the Isaiah Simmons fan club.
Huge Isaiah Simmons fan. He never found a home in this scheme. It just never worked out for him.
And by the way, that's
second time now, because it happened in Arizona too.
With how many defensive coordinators in Arizona? 3, 2?
Yeah.
He's probably at least 4 DCs now.
I was going to say, yeah. I think he's had at least 4. And so he goes to Green Bay, apparently. That's the word that we saw on the internet. And I wish him well. I don't understand it. I've always thought that his primary focus should be as a blitzer. You'd want to scheme him up to give him an opportunity to shoot a gap or to shoot an edge. He never got that real opportunity to do that on a regular basis while he was with the Giants. And I feel bad about it, but I'll pull for him, and I hope he does well for Green Bay.
As for the quarterback thing, Dable did not have him picked in January. I don't know where you read that. I don't know what report you're referring to. That's nonsense. I literally just talked to Brian Dable. Do you know when Brian Dable starts scouting quarterbacks and sees them for the first time? The Senior Bowl. You know when that event takes place? The last week of January. And you have a 15-minute meeting with these guys at the Senior Bowl? He's not drafting. He's not recommending to draft Jaxson Dart after 15 minutes of the Senior Bowl.
How could you?
Always be careful about rumors that are out there. This is why Paul and I tell you guys to take all these reports out there with a grain of salt. So I would say that, James, is something to use as, talk about lessons that scouts kind of learn every draft about who you like and who you're right and wrong about. Mm-hmm. Paul and I the same. As a fan, take reports early in the draft process about who likes who with a gigantic grain of salt. You don't know anything until the coaches get involved, and usually you don't have their reports in on players until at the earliest is at the combine. And we've talked about the process the Giants go through with these quarterbacks. there's no way Brian Dable would have been sold on a quarterback until he had him face-to-face for the private workout, the 30 visit, and the in-person meeting, and that's when he's going to make that decision. You talk about the smoke with Shedeur Sanders. There's a chance off the tape on January 15th that maybe the Giants did really love Shedeur Sanders, right? And then you finish.
You never know.
That's only part of the scouting process.
Correct.
Then you finish the rest of the scouting process. Guys, and the process matters. The tape's the basis of everything. If the guy can't play in games, it doesn't matter, right? But if there's not that much separating the tape, for some positions, the athleticism at the combine matters, right? But for quarterbacks specifically, I don't want to go through the whole process again because we talked about it yesterday, and we did with the Joe Shane interview again. But the 30 visit, the private workout, the board work, and the video work that the quarterbacks do with Dabes when he gets the full day with them and he puts them through that ringer that Joe Shane described to Paul and I in our interview. That stuff for quarterbacks matters immensely because it teaches you about whether or not they can do all the mental gymnastics necessary to succeed at the position. The stuff that when you just watch them on tape, Paul, it's impossible to see.
I think what people need to understand, and I know that the media gets very carried away with who goes to what pro day, who goes to what visitation, what guy is coming to the complex for a visit. I understand all of that, but there's an implication.
And by the way, 30 visits do matter. The Giants drafted 60 guys that had 30 visits. So,
but here's the point.
If the reports are correct.
There's an implication in the media that when they're spending time on a guy, they're spending time on him because they want him. That's the wrong implication. What they're doing is they're spending time on the guy because they're trying to do more research to find out either A, should they want him or should they not want him?
Oh, you know what? This is the way I'm going to put it, Paul.
That's the problem.
This is how I'm going to put it.
Sometimes it's a negative.
When any regular human being goes out to interview for a job, right? The equivalent of your resume on paper, that's the game film.
That's good.
Your resume is what you put on tape, including your stats. That's your resume.
I'll buy that.
Well, let me ask you something. Do any companies hire an important employee just based off their resume?
You'd hope not.
Or do they bring them in? Do they talk to them? Do they see if they're the right person? Do they see if they have the right personality to fit the culture? Do they see that you can problem solve the way that job might make you to problem solve? Can you multitask the way the job requires in that position to multitask? That's what the interview process is for. That's what the Senior Bowl is. That's what the Combine is. That's what 30 visits are. And go read Albert Breer's story last week and this week about just the player you brought up, Shedeur Sanders, and the issues he had in the interview process. Tony Pauline talked about it on our FAN show on Sunday morning and on draft season. The AFC one is coming out this week, and he goes, 3 minutes, Pearson, just on everything that happened during the interview process? It's up already. On everything that, again, not with the Giants specifically, from what he heard from teams around the league about Shedeur's interview process. And that's all those things. He didn't throw at any of the All-Star games. You heard the stories of the meetings. Like Albert Breer, 2 anecdotes in his story today. One where a lot of times what teams will do to see how quarterbacks react when they meet at the Combine, they'll queue up one of their worst plays from the year, an interception.
Right.
And again, I'm just going off of Albert Breer's story. This is not me confirming.
And it's very well done, by the way.
Correct.
Very, very well done.
So I'm not confirming this. I'm not saying this happened with the Giants. I'm just literally reading you verbatim what was said in the story. And the team had a bad Shedeur interception queued up, comes in, they show it to him. He doesn't take any blame for the play. They kind of get into it more, and then he basically says to them, well, maybe we're not the best fit.
That's it.
Like, that's not a good way to approach things.
As I said.
And another team sent him an install on offense. Again, this is according to Albert Breer, if the story is correct. And it had purposeful errors in there that should have been easy for a quarterback to pick up.
And he couldn't figure them out.
And he got in, and he didn't notice any of the errors. They confront maybe is the wrong word, but they pointed out he missed those mistakes. And they didn't even get into the details of what happened, but they said the following exchange was not pretty. I believe that was the quote. I think not pretty is the terminology he used.
Correct.
And guys, stuff like that, especially if you're going to pick them, day one, you can overlook some of that stuff. If the guy is some kind of, freak show athletically and has all these ridiculous traits, you can look past some of that stuff. But when you're considering him as a second-round player or a third-round player, that stuff matters. You're choosing between so many different guys. And finally, I'll just say this. This happens to Paul and I at the Combine every year. We've talked about it. Pearson asked me this question right before he came on the show. When we show up to the Combine, we have certain impressions of players.
Mm-hmm.
When we leave the Combine, we have very different impressions of players.
Yes, we do.
And it has nothing to do with what we see in their workouts.
Correct.
Going into the Combine, and we always tell you to ignore the mock drafts before you get to the Combine. We always tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, before free agency, because then that's when needs are important, right? So everything you see in terms of player rankings and mock drafts pre-Combine, and I'll say there's some exceptions to this. Like, Dane Brugler talks to people. Like, he knows. Like, the guys that do only draft and draft only, they'll be on top of the stuff before you get to Indy.
Well, they're a different category,
correct,
those guys.
But most regular people won't. You get there, everyone was talking about Shedeur as a top 3 pick. And he was right next to Cam Ward. It could go either way. That was the public discourse. When you left Indy, the story was Cam Ward stood alone as the top quarterback.
By far.
And Shedeur was closer to the second group than he was to Cam Ward.
Right.
That's not the media changing their minds, folks.
It's everybody catching up.
The media catching up to what the NFL teams already think. And I think, and Tony brought this up, one of the problems is that Shedeur Sanders did not hire an agent. So you did not have somebody in that room who's getting honest feedback from teams to adjust during the process. And I think for him, that was unfortunate. I'm happy he got to a spot where he's going to have a chance to compete for a job. It's wide open. James, you called before, the Giants should have drafted him late. I don't think it would have worked here because they used the first-round pick on Jaxson Dart. In Cleveland, you have Flacco there. They traded nothing for Kenny Pickett. Dylan Gabriel's a third-round pick. And then you add him into the mix as a true competition. That's a competition. That's different than what the Giants have in their room. I think he has a chance to win that job there.
It's a lot different than the Giants.
If he figures that, if he gets his head together, and look, he's a good kid. He's a smart kid by all accounts. If he puts his head down, works hard, avoids the nonsense, he has a chance to win that job, and I hope he does. I hope he's successful. I don't wish any ill will towards him. But look, the bottom line is now he's going to finally get his feet on some grass. He's going to compete. He's going to have a chance to earn that starting quarterback spot, and I hope he manages to do it for his sake because I want all these guys to succeed. I really do. I want all these guys to succeed.
To cap this for the caller, when you go through the process, there are players who will actually wind up knocking themselves off a team's board. There are other guys who will wind up knocking themselves down a team's board.
Correct.
Okay? Just because a team is spending a lot of time doing their homework on a player, do not assume it is all going to turn out positive for that player and they are going to salivate trying to get him. Sometimes it's going to cause him to drop. Sometimes it's going to cause him to get crossed off. Please understand that. I say it every spring.
And it's different for every team, by the way.
Of course it is. But you have to acknowledge that that's a real possibility. The downside is very real. I don't know why I got to keep screaming it from the mountains every single spring.
Well, I understand because people have ESPN up.
And they believe the hype. They buy the hype and they buy the overwhelming positivity. So-and-so talked to so-and-so. They got to have her. Anyway, that's it for now.
And again, and most of this, a lot of this, some of the pre-draft interview stuff, you could put that on the player. But some of the stuff with, with his name and everything, that's not even Shedeur Sanders' fault. That got foisted onto him by people on the outside. So a lot of that stuff's not even on him. It's not his fault. And we hope he succeeds. We hope he has a nice career. And hopefully when the Giants play the Browns next, he'll be their starting quarterback. And that'll be great for him. And I hope he has a very successful career there. Guys, thanks for being with us. Thanks to Charlie Weis. That'll go up on YouTube later on today. I'm sure Pearson will get a tease from that too, which should be good. A lot of great stuff from Charlie on Jaxson Dart. Make sure you go check out all of our other podcasts. The 2 parts of draft season. Our draft review is up there. We're going to compile all of the player interviews done over the weekend with Manolin and Sean O'Hara, and those will go up there, I think, early tomorrow morning. And then later this week, we got a bunch of guys coming to it. Ryan Wilson, who does a great job covering the draft for CBS, he'll come on. I'm starting to get some college coaches for some of these players. That's going to go up over the course of the next couple of weeks. And I hope to have a couple former NFL quarterbacks come on, too, and talk a little bit about Jaxson Dart and what they saw on tape with him. So a lot of stuff coming your way in the Giants Huddle podcast, Giants.com/podcast, Giants app, Giants YouTube channel. Check it out. Good job, Johnny Mack. Good job, Pearson. We'll see you tomorrow at 12:30 for another episode of Big Blue Kickoff live from the Hackensack Meridian Health podcast studio. Keep getting better.